That evening, my daughter-in-law posted a photo from her wedding anniversary dinner with the caption, "Family only." I looked at the photo. I saw my son smiling beside his wife's entire family. Then I smiled too. No tears, no accusations. I simply pressed like and left one single comment. Then from now on, the family should also be the ones paying the family's bills. 5 minutes later, my phone started buzzing nonstop. And from that moment on, they began to understand. My silence was not acceptance. It was a boundary. It was a crisp Friday evening in Connecticut when I decided I'd officially had enough. My name is Martha. I'm 65 and I live on the ground floor of the duplex I've owned for 30 years. My son Julian and his wife Brooke live in the unit upstairs. That night was their 5th wedding anniversary. A few days prior, Brooke had mentioned in passing while literally walking away from me that I wasn't invited to dinner. She said the reservation was tight and they wanted to keep it intimate. I just nodded. I knew it was a flimsy excuse, but why push in where I wasn't wanted? I made myself a cup of tea and settled into my armchair. I'm not the type to wallow. I lost my husband 10 years ago, and I've learned to be friends with the quiet. But then I opened Facebook. The first thing I saw wasn't from Brooke, but from her mother. It was a photo of a long, lavish table at the best steakhouse in town. Brooke, Julie, and Brooke's parents, her siblings, even 2 cousins were there. Everyone was laughing, raising glasses of expensive wine. The caption read, "Only family. So blessed to finally have all my favorites in one place. Only family." I sat there, the woman who had spent the last 5 years paying the entire property tax bill, the water, the electricity, and the heating for the whole house. Apparently, I didn't make the cut. There was no explosion of temper. Instead, I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I hit like. Then I typed, "In that case, I'll stop paying the bills that the family should be handling themselves." I hit send and set the tablet down. 5 minutes later, the vibrating started. Brooke, then Julian. 30 missed calls in a row. I didn't pick up. Instead, I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps pounding down the stairs. The footsteps hurried closer until there was a frantic knock at my door. It was Julian. I took my time, placed the folder on the dining table, and finally opened up. My son stood there breathless, his face flushed. "Mom, what is with that comment?" Brooke is crying in the car. "Her whole family saw that. Delete it right now." I looked at him calmly. No anger, just facts. "Julian, I'm not deleting anything. It's the truth." He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Julian had always been a peace at any price kind of guy, usually letting Brooke steer the ship. "You're ruining our night," he practically wailed. I leaned against the door frame. "No, Julian. You guys clearly enjoyed your night to the fullest. I'm just tidying up my finances." I handed him the top sheet from my folder, the utility bill for the last quarter. "Starting the 1st of next month, the electricity and water for the upstairs unit will be in your names. I've already revoked the auto pay from my bank account." Julian looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. Why now? I gave a small, thin smile. Because I realized I'm not family. And if I'm not family, I shouldn't be carrying the family's burdens. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. He knew I was right. Just then, the heavy front door slammed. Brooke had gotten out of the car and was stomping up the porch steps. She marched up to Julian, her face a mask of fury and embarrassment. "This is blackmail, Martha," she hissed. I shook my head slowly, closing the door halfway. No, Brooke. This is just adult life. The next morning, the house was eerily silent. Usually, I'd hear Brooke shouting something through the halls, but today, nothing. I sat at my kitchen table, enjoying my coffee. It felt good to shed the weight of paying for two households. I hadn't been exaggerating. I'd had the paperwork ready for weeks. Brooke's disrespect hadn't happened overnight. It had crept in slowly like a draft under a door. She'd started viewing my generosity as her birthright. Around noon, a van pulled into the driveway. I'd scheduled a technician from the utility company days ago to physically separate the meters. As I led him into the basement, I heard the basement door fly open. Brooke stood at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe. "What's going on?" she demanded. "The tech is setting up your own meter," I replied without looking up. "From today on, you pay for what you use." She ran down the stairs, her face pale with disbelief. "You can't do this. We haven't budgeted for this at all." I turned to her. "You've lived here rent-free for 5 years, Brooke. Budgeting for your own lights and water is the bare minimum. You're a smart woman. I'm sure you'll figure it out." She glared at me. "This is unfair. You're punishing us just because I wanted a small private dinner." I took a step toward her. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply adjusting my expenses to match my status in your life. If you treat me like a stranger, you pay the bills like a stranger." She spun on her heel and ran back upstairs. Later that afternoon, I heard them clearly fighting for the first time. The perfect facade was cracking. Monday morning, phase 2 began. Over the years, Brooke had basically annexed the backyard. Her expensive patio furniture blocked my favorite spot under the old cherry tree. When she had friends over, I felt like a prisoner in my own house, staying inside so I wouldn't intrude. That was over. I called 2 local college kids looking for extra cash. While Brooke was at work and Julian was logged into a Zoom call upstairs, we got to work. I had them carefully move every single piece of Brooke's outdoor lounge set up to their private second-story deck. It wasn't about being destructive. It was about redistributing base. Then I went to the garden center. I bought 2 beautiful, oversized Adirondack chairs and a small teak table. I set them exactly where her furniture used to be. To finish it off, I put up an elegant wooden privacy screen between my patio area and the rest of the yard. It looked high-end, but the message was clear sondary. When Brooke got home, I was already sitting under the cherry tree with a glass of Chardonnay and a book. I heard her heels click-clack on the pavement and then stop abruptly. She stared at the screen and my new chairs. "Where is my furniture?" she asked, her voice trembling. I turned a page. "I had it moved to your deck. The backyard belongs to my unit. I'd like to enjoy my summer in peace." "But we always grill down here," she protested. "You still can," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Up on your deck. You'll have much more privacy for those family-only parties." She opened her mouth, closed it, and stormed inside. Doors slammed. My book was particularly good that night. Next on the list was the basement laundry room. Since they'd moved in, Brooke had treated my high-end washer and dryer like her personal property. I hadn't minded back when we were close, but respect is the currency I deal in now, and she was bankrupt. She'd leave her wet clothes in the drum for days, or ask me to just pop her stuff in the dryer since I was already down there. Wednesday morning, I went down. Brooke's blouses and Julian's gym clothes were strewn across the folding table. I ignored the mess. Instead, I took a heavy-duty plug lock out of my toolbox. I'd picked it up at the hardware store the day before. In 2 minutes, the power cord was locked. No one was using that machine without the key currently sitting in my pocket. Thursday night, I heard frantic footsteps on the basement stairs. Then Brooke calling for Julian. I walked out into the hallway as Julian stood staring at the machine. "Mom, did you lock the washer? Brooke has a big meeting tomorrow and needs her suit." I leaned against the banister. I did. I noticed the machine was making a weird noise from overuse. "Since we're separate households now, you should probably look into getting your own set." "But where are we supposed to do laundry tonight?" Julian asked, looking desperate. "There's a 24-hour laundromat 3 blocks away," I suggested. Brooke stepped out from behind him, her face red with rage. "You're doing this on purpose. You're trying to kick us out." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, Brooke. I'm just taking care of my own property. If you love the luxury of independence, you have to pay for it." Saturday brought a lesson in self-sufficiency. It had been an unwritten rule that I did the big grocery run for everyone. I'd stock the extra fridge in the basement with steaks, fresh produce, and Brooke's favorite sparkling water. They'd just help themselves whenever they were hungry. That morning, I went to the store as usual, but my cart stayed light. I bought exactly what I needed for myself: a piece of salmon, some asparagus fruit, and a nice bottle of wine. When I got home, I emptied the basement fridge, scrubbed it down, and unplugged it, leaving the door propped open to air out. That evening, I heard Brooke head downstairs, likely for a bottle of wine. A moment later, she was at my door. She didn't even knock. She just tried to turn the handle. But I'd started locking my door. I opened it slowly. "Is there a problem?" "The basement fridge is empty and turned off," she blurted out. "Where's the food for the weekend?" "I only shopped for myself today," I said. "Since you're handling your own utilities, I thought it was only fair you handle your own groceries too." Brooke gasped. "You could have at least told us, 'We have nothing in the house and the stores close in 20 minutes.'" "I'm not your housekeeper, Brooke. A quick look in your own fridge would have told you that you were low." I paused. "You're adults. I'm sure DoorDash is still delivering." I closed the door gently but firmly. It's amazing how much peace you find when you stop carrying people who don't appreciate the ride. Sunday was traditionally my day in the kitchen. For years, Julian expected a full roast or a big Italian spread. Often, Brooke would invite her parents or friends over without even asking me. They'd sit at my table and let me serve them like a waitress. That Sunday, I woke up early, but instead of reaching for my apron, I took a long, hot shower. I put on my favorite dress and a bit of lipstick. I had booked a table at a very exclusive bistro by the lake. At 11 a.m., I headed out. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Julian looking out the upstairs window, looking confused. Usually the smell of rosemary and garlic would be wafting through the house by then. I spent 3 glorious hours at the bistro. I had an incredible meal, a glass of champagne, and took a stroll by the water. When I got home around 5 p.m., the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Julian was sitting on the bottom step of the porch. "Mom, where were you?" "Brooke's parents came over for lunch. We thought you were cooking." I hung up my coat. "Why would I be cooking, Julian?" "We established last week that we aren't family anymore. At least not in Brooke's eyes." He rubbed his forehead. It was so awkward. We had to order Chinese food at the last minute. Her mom kept asking where you were. I smiled. "You could have told her the truth, that I'm enjoying my free time instead of slaving away for people who exclude me from their milestones." Julian stood up, looking exhausted. "Brooke is talking about moving out. She says she can't take the hostility anymore." I looked him in the eye. My voice was soft but steady. "It's not hostility, Julian. It's boundaries. And if she wants to move, I won't stop you." The threat of moving was Brooke's last-ditch effort to regain control. She thought that as a widow, living in a big house, My biggest fear was being alone. She was wrong. I'd felt far more alone being ignored by them while they lived under my roof. On Tuesday night, Julian knocked. He looked pale, holding a stack of papers. I let him in and made some tea. He sat at the table and spread out some printouts, apartment listings, and a scribbled budget. We looked at rent in the area, he started quietly. It's insane. With our salaries and now having to pay for all our own utilities and food, we'd have nothing left for travel or Brooke's Pilates classes. I sipped my tea and waited. Mom, he finally said, looking at me pleadingly. Can't we just go back to how it was? We'll apologize for the photo. I set my cup down. Julian, it's not just about a photo. It's about fundamental respect. You lived here for free, used my money, and treated me like an annoying obligation. He lowered his head. I know. I was a coward. I just wanted peace with Brooke. I get that, I said gently. But you don't buy peace by letting someone else be exploited. You can stay. But the free ride is over. If you stay, we're signing a formal lease. I'm going to charge a fair market rate rent. Julian swallowed hard. Brooke will never agree to that. She says the house is going to be mine eventually anyway. My look sharpened. Maybe. But until then, it's mine. I'm still alive, Julian. And I refuse to live like a ghost in my own home. When Julian took the news upstairs, the storm broke. I heard Brooke's voice, rising doors slamming, the sound of glass breaking. She wasn't used to anyone saying no to her. She thought I was weak. The next morning after Julian left for work, I went to the basement. I grabbed 10 large moving boxes, taped them together, and stacked them in the common hallway. Then I knocked on their door. Brooke answered in her robe, her eyes red from crying or screaming. She stiffened when she saw me. What do you want? I brought you some boxes, I said calmly. Julian mentioned my terms were unacceptable. I wanted to make the move as easy for you as possible. Do you need tape? She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Her threat had been a bluff, a power move to get me to cave. She never actually intended to give up her comfortable life. You'd really throw your own son out on the street? She spat. Julian is always welcome here, I replied. But he's a grown man who makes his own choices. If he chooses to go with you, that's his right. But I am done being disrespected in the house I paid for. Brooke stepped back. She realized then that she'd lost. No fake tears or guilt trips were going to work. I'd walked off her chessboard. The boxes are in the hall, I added, turning to walk away. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a deep, quiet clarity. That evening, there was no more shouting, just the low murmur of two people forced to face reality. 2 weeks later, a small U-Haul was parked in the driveway. Brooke couldn't swallow her pride enough to pay rent to her mother-in-law, so they'd found a small 2-bedroom on the edge of town. Julian helped her carry the boxes in silence. When they were finished, Julian came into my apartment one last time. He looked tired, but also strangely relieved. The fighting was over. He handed me the keys to the upstairs unit. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, he said softly, giving me a hug. It was the first real, honest hug we'd shared in years. I patted his back. It'll be okay, Julian. Sometimes you need a little distance to remember what someone is actually worth. My door is always open to you. He nodded, turned, and got into the car with Brooke. She stared straight ahead as they pulled away. I stood at the window and watched them go. As the car turned the corner, I took a long, deep breath. The house was completely silent. It wasn't a heavy, lonely silence. It was perfectly peaceful. I went upstairs to the empty unit. It smelled like floor cleaner and a fresh start. I decided I'd do some light renovations and rent it out to a nice, quiet, retired couple. With the extra income, I'd travel maybe Italy or the south of France. I went back to my living room, sat in my favorite chair, and picked up my tablet. I thought about that photo for a second. It felt like it was taken a lifetime ago. I hadn't plotted some grand revenge or hired lawyers. I had simply stopped making myself small. I'd taken back the keys to my own life. I opened my book, took a sip of tea, and leaned back. I wasn't a supporting character in someone else's story anymore. I was the lead in mine.